And we are.
Test, test, check, check. Robert or Ali, can you hear me? Okay, can we test your sound, Robert?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep, loud and clear.
Okay, same for you.
We're just getting ready to start. Can you share your screen so I can test that too?
Yep.
Seth, it was a bunch of gobbledygook to begin with, but I can hear you now.
Perfect. Thanks, Ali. We are.
Is this screen share coming through?
Yep, screen share looks good. We're all ready to go.
Sweet.
All right.
All right. Hey, terrific. Hey, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. I'd like to go ahead and call this meeting to order and welcome everyone to the Coeur d'Alene School District 271 Board Workshop of September 23rd, 2024. Would everyone please rise, and together we'll say the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Well, terrific. We've got a full agenda today for our workshop, and so looking forward to being able to dig into lots of different topics. I'd like to go ahead and introduce our participants for this afternoon. Starting at my far right is Ms. Marianne Southwick, Clerk of the Board, Dr. Sean Hawker, Superintendent. To my left is Ms. Leslie Bierke, Vice Chair, Ms. Heather Tenbrink, Board Member, Mr. Jimmy McAndrews, Board Member. I'm Rebecca Smith, Board Chair, and Trustee Anderton is joining us by phone this afternoon. Public comment is not taken at workshops typically, and so comments for the board may be submitted via email at trustees@cdaschools.org or in writing through the clerk. Thanks. Is there a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? All right, today's agenda is approved, and we'll turn it right over to you, Dr. Hawker, for your first introductions.
Thank you. We have 5 items we're going to discuss with the board today, and the first one is a survey presentation. And I believe Robert is on. There he is right there. They've got him moved over to the screen. Hi, Robert. You are live and ready to go.
Great. I will put my screen up here and we will get into the presentation. Thank you for having me. So for this work, we kind of, I worked with the team and the staff at the district to basically just look at the people who live in the district and kind of understand their feelings, right? It was really to try to set a baseline of understanding, who you all are serving, parents and non-parents alike. And so I did a representative sample of 250 people within the school district. That yields a margin of error of just a little over 6%. So as you look at this, and we did these interviews the first week in September, they were conducted through a combination of live phone calls and text messages that went out. The 250 respondents who replied to the survey were used quotas to match for age, gender, geography, and race within the district. So those things are all captured here. And so when you look at my slides here, what you'll see at the top, usually in bar chart format, is the response of all 250 respondents. So this will kind of represent the whole district's thoughts. And then down below, I'll break them down using a few different crosstabs. In this instance, how long people have lived in the Coeur d'Alene area and whether or not they have children or grandchildren in K-12 public schools in the Coeur d'Alene area. Any questions before I begin?
I don't think so. Not yet. Thanks for being here.
I will just go into it. The first question we asked is, do you have a favorable or unfavorable image of the Coeur d'Alene School District? 49%, almost a majority, a plurality, said they have a favorable image. 26% said unfavorable. 21% basically said, I have no opinion or have never heard of them. Of the school district. I don't know enough about it. And so from a by basically 2-1, people have said, I think, are you guys seeing the slides that I'm doing here? Is my screen share going through?
Yeah, and we also have them printed in front of us, so we're
Okay.
also kind of looking at the ones in front of us.
Good. Okay. Good deal. So if the group of people who have the lowest image rating of the Coeur d'Alene School District are the ones who've lived here the least, which is to be expected. And what you can see is actually a plurality of people who've lived in Coeur d'Alene less than 5 years say they have no opinion of the school district, so they don't know that much about it. And the longer you've lived in Coeur d'Alene, the more likely you are to have a favorable opinion of the district. By 53 to 24, people who have lived here over 10 years say they have a favorable opinion. And then, as you might expect as well, the people who have kids and grandkids in the school system are also much more likely to report a high level of satisfaction, a favorable rating for the school district. And if you don't, again, not that you are unfavorable, but more likely that you just don't have an opinion. You can see that group outnumbers the people who have an unfavorable opinion of the school district among those who don't have children or grandchildren. And what I'm going to show you on the next slide is I asked the 49% of people who had a favorable opinion and then the 26% of people who said they had an unfavorable opinion a different question. So on the left, I asked the people who have they had a favorable opinion of the Coeur d'Alene School District. Why? What are the strengths of the Coeur d'Alene School District? And if you had an unfavorable opinion, what improvements do you believe are most needed? And I'll start on the left. These are open-ended responses. People got to say whatever they wanted, really, in terms of their answer to this question. I did not give listed answers, but I did kind of group like responses once they all came back. Teachers and staff was number one. Almost a third of the respondents said that was the reason. You can see that mostly comes from people who have lived in Coeur d'Alene a little bit longer, have a little bit more familiarity with the school district. Excellent, good schools, good education, right? The quality of the education they're receiving, that came from people who have not been here as long, more frequently. And you can imagine, again, if you moved in from a different place, one thing you might know about an area that you moved to is this place has good schools, right? So it might be kind of reputation based, maybe not personal experience based. Academics, curriculum, parent involvement, good traditional conservative values, right? So a lot of different things kind of coming through in terms of what are the strengths. And then improvements, better money management, fiscal transparency, budget control. That was kind of the number one piece.
And Robert,
this idea.
can we just pause just for 1 second?
Yeah.
Let's see if we can't get the next slide, especially for our guests that are here
I do.
or walking.
I have the whole thing up here. I'm not sure. You're seeing my screen here?
Yep, there you go. Yep. That's
So when I go here, is it not moving?
Nope, now it's there. Now you're on the right slide. It just wasn't on the right slide before.
But okay, so tell me, did this move the slide for you?
What you just did.
Whatever you just did moved it to the right slide.
Okay, what is the title of the slide you're looking at?
Strengths and improvements for Coeur d'Alene schools.
Okay, so it's not advancing when I'm in full screen.
No.
Okay, got it. That's all I need to know. I'll do it like this.
Thanks.
Yes, so when you better money management, fiscal transparency, budget control, kind of the number one place for improvement, better teacher pay, updated curriculum. You can kind of see here some of the politics kind of getting into the school district a little bit, right? Drop liberal, woke DEI programs, banned books, that sort of thing. So there's a few of those things that come through, though. Again, I want to make clear this 11% number, that's 11% of 26%, so 2% of my respondents gave that answer, right? So that's a subset of a subset. These are all pretty small numbers in terms of, except for kind of the top responses, in terms of people giving those open-ended responses to me. We asked about people's opinions on property taxes. We said, do you think they're too high or about right in the area? 47% of respondents said, we think taxes are too high, with kind of evenly split between, kind of in the intensity of their responses, between way too high and a little bit too high, and then 46% who said it's about right. And that has a big correlation. One of the things we asked later was about how they were going to potentially vote on a upcoming levy. And there's a big correlation, as you might imagine. The people who vote yes are much more likely to say that they think their property taxes are about right. People who say no are much more likely to say they think their property taxes are way too high, right? So those things have correlation in terms of how they're planning to approach the levy that's upcoming in November. And then you can see, how would you describe the level of funding schools in the Coeur d'Alene school district, right? a majority of people say the school district needs more money, right? So again, despite what you saw there in terms of fiscal management on the open end before, a majority of people in the district saying the school needs more money, and again, a really strong correlation to how people say they're approaching the ballot with the levy, with 80% of the people voting yes saying that it needs more money. Only 11% of the people voting no say the district needs more money.
Robert,
Yeah.
did all 250 respondents answer these questions on the property tax slide?
Let's see. It looks like we had probably 3% of people who said I don't know, or not sure. Right? That's why anything that doesn't add to 100 is usually a function of people saying I'm not sure, I don't know the answer.
Okay.
How would you rate the quality of schools? Excellent, good, 52%. Fair, poor, 38%. Again, only 13% poor, right? So, we have a really, a huge majority of people rating the quality of education fair, good, or excellent in the school district, and, a majority saying good or excellent, which is really good. And then, when you look at how confident are you that the schools in the Coeur d'Alene district are preparing students for success, an even higher number, right? 60% saying I'm confident in that, 18% very confident versus 30% saying not confident. You can kind of see those similar trends where the people who have been living in the Coeur d'Alene school district for longer are more likely to say they feel confident in the preparation for future success and in the quality of the education that's being provided. And almost everybody said they were familiar with the idea of school levies. One of the things we wanted to understand is, do people know what you all mean when you talk about that, when it's in the paper, when it's on the news? School levy, supplemental levy, 87% of people who live in the district said they were familiar, 11% only said that they were not familiar. So pretty wide understanding of that term. And then when we asked, on the left, how likely are you to support a public school levy? 59% said likely. When we gave them the kind of details of what's coming up in November, that went to 53%. Who said they were going to say yes, a net change of about 12, right? You can see 30, we were plus 30 over here and we're plus 18 here. And so the folks that kind of moved the most were homeowners, kind of dropping off. When you kind of say some of those specifics about what's happening with taxes and the dollar amount, you can imagine why that might happen. And then especially people who have not been here as long. Or not been in Coeur d'Alene as long, kind of words of a drop off where they say, in general, over here, I think I'm kind of likely, but then specific to this school levy, which I might not have much connection to, I might not have kids. Again, you can see that's a big a decider in terms of who's voting yes and no, where you have 48% of people who don't have kids voting yes versus 62% of the people who do have kids who are voting yes, right? So again, a big correlation between those two things.
Robert, just really quick, and if this was in the early slides, my apologies, but do we have a breakdown of the total percent of your 250 that fell into the years of living in Coeur d'Alene?
Correct.
You do? Where was that?
I do. I know you have not seen it.
Okay, sorry.
It is right here. 10% lived less than 5 years. 16% were 5 to 10. 11 plus was 72, essentially, right? 52% of people were more than 20 years.
Okay, sorry about that.
Nope, I should have brought that up at the meeting. Thank you for flagging that for me.
Do you think based upon your knowledge of the demographics, you captured a reflective sample?
I do. One of the things that happens, and I do a statewide survey for Boise State every year for their School of Public Policy, and we look at, again, in migration and where people are coming from. And, one of the things that happens is you have a lot more people move back. This isn't always the case, but it is in the Treasure Valley, and it's partly true in North Idaho. When I look at that, there is that you have a lot of people who, when they answer that question, less than 5 years, or they may be counting other years they've come back, right? They're kind of boomerang people. You may have heard that term before, right? Where they maybe were from North Idaho, left, came back. You have a lot of people who maybe have moved from another part of Idaho, right? And so here we were specifically saying to Coeur d'Alene, but when you think about living in Idaho, a lot of people will move within Idaho. And so even though the population has increased a lot. It's not always that there's a ton, that everybody kind of considers themselves a new resident or answers that question to say, you know, that you should expect a really big number in that kind of under 5-year category. We said, you know, how important is it that the school district provides sports programs and then art and music programs to students? And this is an important lesson, as I told the team or staff when I was talking to them, in kind of how survey research works, which is that you see here 80% or 79% said sports are important, 88% said that art and music programs are important. And so those look like really big numbers. That's everybody says this is really important, whether you're, you know, whether you support the levy, whether you don't, whether you're undecided, everybody thinks these things are important. And this is kind of like a Coke and Pepsi situation, right? Which is that if you ask people, do you like Coke? Yes, I like Coke. And do you like Pepsi? Yes, I like Pepsi. But you have to kind of make them make a choice. And so what we found out, which was really interesting, we say, what are the top 2 elements that should be funded as a part of the budget for public schools in the Coeur d'Alene area? You know, music, theater, and art programs and sports are down here at the bottom with school nurses. So while people think they are really important and do place a high level of you know, kind of interest in them, it really is kind of the nuts and bolts, you know, of schooling and of teacher salaries and benefits, classroom resources and materials, school facilities and maintenance that kind of make up the bulk of what people think should be the top 2 kind of funding mechanisms, right? Even the people, you know, voting yes, by far, teacher salaries and benefits. That goes back to that first open end. What do people who like the district like about it? They like the teachers. One of the things they would like to improve, higher teacher salaries. So that comes back all the way here at the end when we talk about, you know, what should we be funding in terms of the budget. Obviously, it's not an exhaustive list of things that you could fund, but we tried to provide a wide range of choices for them. And then finally, where do you get most of your news and information? We had newspapers, local news. That's like on TV, right? So we have newspapers either in print or online, local news on TV, social media, cable news, kind of meaning like Fox News or CNN or MSNBC, something like that, and then radio. And then I just thought it was interesting just in terms of, you know, where people get their news and how they're voting. You can see kind of, you know, local news and newspapers kind of the strongest. And if you're not getting your news, you know, if you're getting from social media or cable news, again, not as locally oriented, you're less likely to be voting yes, right? So where people are getting local news and hearing about you, right, one thing you could infer is people are pleased with what they're hearing about the Coeur d'Alene School District, and that makes them want to vote yes. But there's a lot of good information here. Obviously, the radio tab is really small, so I wouldn't really look at that one too closely. But interesting to kind of know the spread of where people are getting a lot of their information. But a majority of people between local news on TV and newspapers online or in print, getting local news as their main source. And so just kind of quickly in summary, district's really well liked, seen as providing a good education, you know, even more so that preparation for students, preparing the students for the future success. I think that, you know, focusing communications on that and talking about what the district is doing is good, because that's what people really think you're good at already. They're confident in that. Not an intense amount of, you know, property tax pressure right now. You know, that means that, you know, in terms of the ballot levy, there's more people who are interested in voting yes on that. You know, the people who kind of are the most interested or, you know, kind of paying attention in terms of targeting for communications, women, all parents really, longtime residents and homeowners, right, I think. And then I mentioned this before, but, you know, just in terms of the nuts and bolts being kind of the number one thing that people are interested in, teachers, classrooms, facilities really come to the top of mind, and talking about what you all are doing on funding that is really important. So I will pause there for any questions.
I've got one. You've mentioned homeowners a few times. Am I missing where that, or was that just a separate question piece?
Oh, it was a separate question. I don't think, again, I think, let's see if I put it in here. I didn't, but it was like, I want to say 80 to 20 homeowners to renters in terms of the sample. But I showed it to you on this question, for example, kind of how people are voting on the levy right now, where you can see homeowners are actually doing a little bit better than renters, like maybe against conventional wisdom. But that is one place where I showed that just as a cross tab, but I didn't show the actual question results.
And then is there anything within I guess, this cross section that allows you to, I guess, everybody here says they're going to vote either yes or no, but versus the folks that'll actually go to the ballot versus won't go to the ballot. Do you have any data for us? More
I think
prominent?
that from when I looked at it, I think that the people who have a stronger, history of voting, right, which if they vote more frequently in the past versus those who vote a little less infrequently, the levy was actually doing a little bit better with the people who were more frequent voters.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thanks, Robert. I think because we're just looking at it, we're just trying to absorb it all. Dr. Hucker,
I know it's a lot of data.
Yeah, Dr. Hucker, since you've sat with this a little longer than we have, and since we do have Robert here, I want to take advantage of that. Is there anything you want to especially point out as you or your team have sat with these numbers?
Well, and I would open this up.
Notice right now.
Thanks. I'd open this up to any team member too that wants to chime in. I think it's great information. In fact, I think I was encouraged that this is information that we would want to gather periodically, every few years. I think this was really good. I think what I remember most from 18 months ago and the focus on levy information at that time, specifically for today, I think we're right on spot with sharing out the messages of all the benefits of the levy, what it provides, how it helps our classes, prepares our students, while also being mindful. You can see that even as much as we know that our sporting events fill the bleachers and the gyms every weekend with sporting activities, it's equally, if not according to this survey, even more value, I guess, or more in the attention of our community for lots of the other programs as well. Our arts and extracurricular activities and our music programs, our drama, play, all of that stuff I throw all into that category. And I found that was very good information. I see Stephanie up at the podium, so I'll let our resident expert on communications also chime in.
Yeah, I was just going to add that two things. One is this is what we kind of call a climate survey. So all we're doing is it's a finger in the wind about, kind of how are the people that we serve feeling about the services that we provide. And that's good information for elected officials and for staff, like me to understand. So we know we can meet our folks where they are. So that's where it begins. Most, organizations do these every 3 to 5 years, depending on, kind of what the cycle looks like. How many resources you have to dedicate to this kind of work. So I think this is the first climate survey this district's ever done. So if you wanted to continue to do it over time, every couple of years, you ask the same questions and you can find out how things are moving, resonating. Are we meeting our folks, the needs that they tell us they have? The other thing I wanted to add is if you look at the breakdown for levy funding and where those 7 or 8 buckets, the things that our community is telling us are important to them line up with the way we're funding things from the levy. If you look at the table or the pie chart, that the community is saying we want you to focus on teachers and classroom resources and academics. That's the biggest piece of the pie when we look at how we're spending that $25 million. So that's good to know, if we're out of whack there somehow, or we're not, focusing on the priorities that the community has, a survey like this will help us identify that.
Robert, can I ask you one quick question? In the back, it talks about the audience profile, and I'm looking at the kids in school, and so there's a breakdown there between public, charter, private. Of your sample, and from what you know and have looked at, do some of those percentages break down to where those living within our district kind of choose to send their kids?
Yeah, I don't know the exact breakdown of the Coeur d'Alene area, but most populations in places, with rare exceptions, almost 9 in 10 kids go to public schools if they're in school.
Right. Thank you.
Right. This might have piggybacked over a little bit. Sorry, I'm losing my voice. With the district our size, about 9,600, it's a little surprising that the sample size seems low to me. Is this kind of normal? I'm not well versed in these kinds of things, so.
Yeah, no, you're right to ask that. This is probably the smallest sample I would do that I think is like statistically significant, but I do think it is. But it's also a pretty small district. So just to give you kind of a comparison point, I do national surveys. I do 1,000 interviews. If I do a statewide survey in Texas, I might do 800. When I do a statewide survey in Idaho, I'll do 500 or 400, right? So for the whole state of Idaho, I'll do 400 interviews and feel very confident in the results and the margins of error. And so 250, I think, for this size district is appropriate and cost effective for you all, more importantly.
Okay, thanks.
Anything jump out at you? Anything you're like surprise you at all? Or did you, I guess,
I think, you know, what I would say, I don't want to cut you off, but I would, what stood out to me were really just kind of where people were at on the economic stuff. Like you see and hear lots of economic pressures from people in terms of cost of living, trying to make it week to week, and paychecks and things like that. And so to see a willingness in the district to say, I think my property taxes are about right? For people not to complain about taxes, that doesn't happen all the time. Most people would say, I just want them lower. So to have a plurality of people say that, and then to have a majority of people say, I think the school district should have more money, like it needs more money, is also good, right? Because people are always, really interested in, increasing funding for government or schools or other things like that. So I thought those two things were kind of the most interesting, but kind of maybe the least related to schools, but obviously have an impact on the levy.
that's good feedback. And then if you were to grade this as far as like the average person's perception of our district, A through F, would you give us?
Right now, I think this is like a B+. I think this is really strong, right? I mean, I think that you have a lot of new people who just don't know about you guys. And again, that's a function. I know, I'm sure Stephanie would like a bigger communications budget. Everybody would like to be able to say more and do more with the school. But I think, once this new population kind of gets educated and caught up on what's going on and the good work you guys are doing, that obviously the people who have kids and grandkids in the school see, that will catch up and maybe we'll get you to an A next time.
And do you have any strategies around that? Because they're not our captive audience in our database.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about that, about places, and I'll work with the staff on this, but, where you can go and get, lists of people who have newly registered to vote or have changed, file a change of address with the post office, right? And so maybe doing some non-traditional communications where you guys are usually used to going into your parent and grandparent or, guardian audience. This might be a place where you could kind of go outside that and say, come see what we're doing, or brag about yourselves a little bit to people who don't hear from you that often.
Robert, thank you so much.
Okay.
We'll all be looking at this data even closer in the days to come, and so really appreciate it and appreciate the work that you did. So thanks.
Thank you. If you have any follow-up questions, Stephanie knows how to find me.
All right, terrific. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Stephanie.
Great. Well, next up is the student cell phones, and I know all of us have been looking forward to this conversation. So,
Chair Smith, good evening. Superintendent Hawker and members of the board. Tonight we continue a conversation that we had. Red light is on. Hopefully they can hear me okay. We continue our conversation that we had this last August when we looked at Board Policy 3265 regarding personal electronic devices and specifically cellular devices in classroom environments. Our executive team, led by Mr. Trent Derrick, our Executive Director of Secondary Education, has been diligently working on tonight's presentation, but conveniently scheduled a conference during this time, so I'll be leading this conversation this evening. But he has been taking the lead, collaborating with our building leaders as we work to maintain those class time free of distractions. So this last time that we had discussed, we talked about emphasizing the policy expectations and looking for new ways to engage and motivate students while limiting all of the dings and bings and distractions that a personal device could bring.
They can't can't
The first
stop
thing that we want to do
looking
is
at
talk
social
about the
media.
why.
Their brains have changed.
They become addicted.
And there's something very dangerous about that.
The number one psychiatric disorder among teenagers is anxiety. Typically, it's anxiety about needing to check in with social media.
There's another study that looked at fear of missing out, and it looked at kids who have high anxiety around missing out. Even though social media makes them more anxious, makes them more worried about missing out, they can't stop looking at it. That prefrontal cortex hasn't developed enough for them to be able to put it down, to say to themselves, it's not making me feel good.
The prefrontal cortex, this area of the brain that is involved in our cognitive control, our ability to process and direct our attention based on our goals, is the last part of our brain to develop.
This doesn't get completely myelinated until you're in your mid to late 20s.
So kids are getting these tools right when they have the least capability of actually controlling their behavior.
I think we can confidently say that it's changing the way that teens interact with each other, with peers, with the world, and that those changes in interactions lead to sort of changes in behaviors, changes in psychiatric and sort of mental health.
We should not be surprised. And it's not just because the culture changed. It's because their brains have changed. They also get trained in instant gratification by these devices. And there's something very dangerous about that, because in real life, we don't get everything that we want instantly.
They are bombarding our teenagers and our young adults with so much that they become addicted to the continuous input of stimulus and information.
We know that there are many activities that are critical for our development. Face-to-face communication, physical activities, exposure to nature, and sleep. I would say that all of these are being threatened in some way by increasing access to information technology.
So that is a clip from the 2020 film of The Social Dilemma, and certainly this is not just a Coeur d'Alene issue. States across the nation, including 13 states, have passed laws or enacted policies that ban or restrict students' use of phones in schools, either at a statewide level or mandate that districts have a policy that have some sort of a banning component. 3 states also have statewide policies that restrict a student's access to their phone during hours: Florida, South Carolina, and Louisiana. Virginia, Ohio, Minnesota, and Indiana require school districts to implement policies that reduce a child's phone usage in schools. Others, again, recommend it only and offer incentives if policies are enacted. This is something that we have taken a very close look at, and we've worked with all of our building leaders at the very beginning of the year to make sure was emphasized. And I know that we're not providing you a whole lot of data that you haven't seen. These days, though, you would struggle to find an American teenager that does not own or have access immediately to some sort of device. Parents usually give their child on average at the age of 13 years old. However, as you saw, there are numerous concerns that devices are replacing true social interactions, leading to greater isolation and loneliness. The graphs that you see up on the screen right now are from the United States Surgeon General, which shows the changes in cognitive behavior and social connection over the past 20 years. And certainly you can see marked decreases in companionship, social engagement with friends, among others, many of which are related directly to access to personal devices. We, however, are a little bit fortunate because of the fact that we have a mental health department. We have people who specifically have been instrumental in combating many of these symptoms and connecting families to resources. However, we also know that just our interventions are not going to be enough, and that we collectively, with the Board of Trustees, the school district administration, our building administration, our teaching staff, our parents and guardians, all have to make a collected and concerted effort to reduce incidences of depression, suicidality, and according to Twenge, can be attributed only to obsessive cell phone use. This is also emphasized if you take a look at the graph between genders and the incidence of depression amongst teens, where girls have a much higher increase, an almost 100% increase since 2004, the start of the cell phone revolution. We also provided you a graph in your pamphlet or in your packet that tells about what happens with depression and different income levels. According to this sample, around 22% of youths felt depressed, and families of poverty were more negatively impacted. So, now that we've laid that groundwork and we talked a lot with our building teams at the very beginning of the year, we wanted to make those emphases that we had told you were important to all of us. These images are what we find across the district today. As we discussed, we feel that Policy 3265 adequately addresses our shared goals, but we also recognize that implementation needed emphasis. We can guarantee you that this policy has been thoroughly discussed at each of our buildings as we prepared for a new school year, and that many of our leaders and their teams have already done so with great emphasis. A few of our leaders are here tonight. We'll highlight Melissa LaPrath, principal of Woodland Middle School, and Mike Randalls, principal of Coeur d'Alene High School, and we'll allow them to be able to provide any additional feedback that you might want to as well. Let's first highlight Woodland. Woodland has initiated a pilot program that cell phones are put away from beginning of bell to last bell, and the cell phones must remain in lockers or in backpacks, and the backpacks stay in the lockers. So one way or the other, they are not allowed in the classroom environment. They do believe that with this extra emphasis, that their efforts have scored a 5 out of 5 thus far when you talk to their teaching staff. The challenge, of course, is consistency and how the staff enforces the procedure, similar to what we've already run into with 3265 as it is written. Let's go across town to Venture Academy, where cell phones, earbuds, smartwatches, or any other personal electronic device is not permitted during classes. If a device is seen or heard, the student will be asked to turn that into the office, which can only be picked up by a parent or a guardian. Any student who refuses to turn in their device will be suspended for the remainder of the day. According to Principal Kennedy at Venture Academy, this has been a 5 out of 5 so far. And I will tell you, we hosted our first learning walk of the year this year at Venture Academy. And it was marked that every person in the room noticed that when they were in a classroom, nobody saw any sort of personal device. Let's talk to Coeur d'Alene High School. Coeur d'Alene High School used some building funding to place a lockbox in each classroom, and teachers can use that or a modified shoe organizer to place devices in specific pouches. They also emphasize consistency, and I, as a parent of 2 Coeur d'Alene Vikings, received very clear communication from the building about what was expected. They also took an educational approach with their students and had a cell phone teach-to lesson presented to all students in a video format. Here's a picture of some of the holders. When you walk into a classroom, many of the classroom teachers have assigned students a specific number, and students are trained at this point to go into the classroom and place it into the proper number, or they go into the area. The image that you see on the right-hand side is a lockbox. It's a keyed box of which the classroom teacher has the key to the box, and inside there are certain slots that are numbered, and you place your phone into that box, which is locked up during the day. We asked Principal Randalls how this has been going so far with this extra emphasis, and he reported to us about a 4.5 out of 5. The current costs are also identified there for you. It's about $70 per lockbox and about $13 to $18 for a tree holder that are in many of the classrooms. We've also started to take a look at some other options available to us. We have been in contact with Yondr, which is spelled Y-O-N-D-R, and I had assumed that some of the Yondr pouches were going to be here, but I thought that those were dropped off. Is that not the case? Oh well, I'm sorry, I made an assumption. But these are magnetized pouches, and each student would be assigned a magnetized pouch, and it takes a specific magnetized holder to open those pouches. So students would be asked to put their device in the magnetized pouch at the beginning of the day, and then you place some of these magnet discs that you see in the background there around the building, which could be opened at specific times. So a student could get their pouch reopened at the end of the day. We have seen some success from some of these implementations across the nation. Some states have been partnering directly with Yonder as a provider, but this does come with a significant financial interest as well. It's $25 per pouch plus implementation costs if we were to go that way. There are some grant opportunities that we are pursuing potentially for that. With the limited time that we wanted to make sure that we could hear your thinking and to talk about what has worked out. We would also, of course, invite, if you have additional questions for Mrs. LaPrath or Mr. Randalls, to be able to answer those at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Nelson.
Well, you started the presentation saying that we have a pilot program, but when I look at our policy, that should already be in place. So I'm thrilled and I'm super excited to hear what you both have to say about how it's going. I am a huge fan and advocate for limiting cell phone use. I think it's the best thing for our students. So I'll look forward to that, but I hope that this is something we can implement district-wide ASAP. I'll just say that for now.
Thank you.
So I might have heard a rumor. Have the pouches been implemented at Woodland? No, but we have some that are going to be piloted, or
That is the case. We have worked on a small-scale pilot with Yonder so that we can do some pilot work with them. We have a few pouches right now. I'd have to rely on Mr. Derrick as to where we are at in that process. But that is the case, that we'd like to consider Yonder as part of these multiple options that we're looking at. Can I follow up with you on that, Trustee Smith?
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess I was just going to clarify, is that what the pilot is, the Yonder pouches?
That's one of the options that we're looking at. One of them is, again, those lock boxes that you see at Coeur d'Alene High School, or the procedures that Woodland Middle School is putting into place, where things are all the way, where they actually place things in the locker. So there's no additional hardware, software that you would need to be able to do so.
So two quick questions just for Mr. Randalls then.
And Mike, you want to come on over?
Yeah, sorry, make you move. As well.
It's on.
Thanks for being here. One quick question. I know that our policy currently reads, that high school students are allowed to have them during cell phones during passing periods. Have you seen a decrease at all this year in between passing periods, or are they still out? I'm going to assume that I know the answer almost, but I'd like to know if maybe there's been any sort of change there.
Yeah. One of the pictures I had shared with Trent that really caught my attention, let me speak to two things. The first thing is, I don't know if there's been a decline between classes. What caught my attention was I couldn't believe how loud, I said last week, I was shocked by how loud our second lunch was. Our second lunch period is larger than our first lunch. And so I was just thinking, it's just a lot of kids. And then I was talking to my wife and I just said, boy, I really can't believe how loud it is. Well, I think they're talking more. Yes. And so I think some of this, there's definitely some momentum, and I don't know if it's carrying on between classes, but I do believe it's carrying on into the lunchroom. And where I really saw it, what really stuck out was at an assembly last week. And I had walked in and the kids were, filling into the bleachers and the band's playing the fight song, and I thought it was really loud. But I looked around, I actually took a picture of it and I shared it with the staff after school that day on that Friday, and actually shared the picture with the staff as a celebration. Because it wasn't intended or anything, but I did not see, at least on one side of the bleachers, probably 700 or 800 kids, I did not see a single cell phone. But I do think there is some momentum happening, but we'll see. So hopefully that answers your question.
But you're not. I mean, they have their phones on them at lunch, right?
They do.
So they're just getting more used to not having not
I think
using
so.
the
I think-
phone.
I think
so
they're
even though they
used-
have access to the phone at lunch, they're
Yeah.
choosing.
Correct. Yep.
This is beautiful. So, Mr. Randalls, if you got to make your own policy, what would it look like?
You know, I don't think I can answer that question fairly for a couple more months.
Okay.
Because I'm curious to see how this plays out. I do think we have some, as I made clear to the students, is this isn't a pilot policy. The policy's always been in place. This is a practice. This is a pilot practice, the way we're enforcing it. That's what's new. Because while the policy has always been in place, the policy has never been clear about the presence of the cell phone in the classroom. And that matters, right? There's a big difference between me having my cell phone right here and me having my cell phone in my backpack. When I was in Sandpoint, we called it out of sight, out of mind.
Mm-hmm.
And the more I think we work to enforce that, the better off we're going to be. But I think there are some things we still need to tighten up at CHS, and I think that'll come with time. And then in a couple months, if those steps have not improved the situation, my suggestion would be at that time to ban cell phones at the school. But I feel like we still need a few more months to determine that, my opinion.
Yeah. Do you feel like there's just some organic buy-in from kids that kind of recognize they're mature enough to recognize this probably isn't the best thing for me?
Yeah, I think most kids know it's not that healthy for them. I do. I equally believe that there are, just as the video shared, there are some kids who are genuinely addicted to it, and they need that fix, and they're trying to get that fix, between classes maybe. But the majority of the kids, I would say, they know it's not healthy. At least I personally haven't received any pushback on anything from kids. Sometimes kids want to come in and have a meeting to discuss, some negotiation. I haven't had any of that.
Yeah.
But, I think we'll know better in a few months.
Right. I had met with one of my old coaches and teachers, and he was really big on it not being available during passing periods, because he would say that, that's when they're checking it and something catches their attention between. He's like, I have like 15 minutes to start every class where I have to have their undivided attention, or it's, mission impossible.
Yeah.
And he said, whatever they just saw on Snapchat or Facebook or Twitter or whatever has got their attention. If it's meaningful enough to them, now I'm contending for that. So his whole goal or his whole thing was, if it's in the middle of between classes, it might as well just be available all the time. But just wondering if we can get your opinion on that. Maybe teachers' opinions on that too.
Yeah, I think the teachers would probably be more important. I just did when we met on Friday, we did a quick debrief on how things were going, and we have as many folks on our teaching staff that would rather just see cell phones go away altogether. But I believe, we probably had 74 teachers in the staff meeting the other day, counselors, whatnot, and, asked for this, and every thumb went up. That so far, so good. They felt like the, students' attention had improved, distractions had decreased. But would it improve vastly more, if we were to remove them altogether? I don't know. I think time will tell. But so far, it's proven to be effective. But like I say, I do believe we need to take a couple more steps at CHS to really batten down the hatches on it.
Cool.
Melissa, one question for you, because the backpacks in their lockers kind of ties with this. Could you tell us a little bit more about that and how that's been helpful and successful?
So it's new this year. So this year we assigned lockers to all students, grades 6 through 8, and they are not allowed to have their their backpacks with them as they go back and forth to classes. So they keep their backpacks in their lockers. So cell phones are either in the lockers or in the backpack. Either way, they're in their lockers. I would say that it has definitely been a learning curve for the kiddos, more so because we had 2/3 of our school that had never had lockers before. Because 6th and 7th graders didn't have lockers last year. So the 6th graders didn't have lockers last year. So 7th and 6th graders were both learning how to utilize lockers. And 8th graders were learning how to utilize lockers without taking their backpacks with them to all their classes. So there's a learning curve, but the longer we've done it, the more I would say the more at ease students are with utilizing the backpacks in their lockers and going back and forth. And they've learned to organize to where they can take, a binder with a couple of classes in their Chromebooks and go to class, and they don't have to go back and forth to their lockers in between every class. As far as cell phones go, I would repeat some of what Mr. Randalls had said, in the fact that we also noticed that our lunchroom was really loud, and we actually had students saying the same thing. It's so loud. And we also went from 3 lunches to 2 lunches. So we're like, okay, it's an increased number of students, but we also have no electronics out during the school day. So that includes their Chromebooks, that they are not allowed to use their Chromebooks during lunch either. And so instead of seeing kids doing this quietly at lunch, they're talking to one another. We see them interacting. I see them outside. It used to be that we'd have a whole crew that would line up along the building, and they would be either on their phones or on their computers playing games, lots of stuff. They are all now interacting with one another. They're either out playing volleyball, they're running around. So it's really great to see the students getting outside and getting some movement. In talking to staff, I talked to my counseling staff specifically, and they said the biggest thing that they've seen is the drop in referrals of students wanting to see them because there's some sort of conflict that's happened over Snapchat, Instagram, that they saw at lunch. Because last year we allowed them at lunch. So they would see this big rise after lunch of kids wanting to come in and talk to the counselors because they were upset. And they said that they have seen hardly any conflict or drama in that sense. That's been brought up via social media and the phones. And as far as teachers, staff, it's really been, knock on wood, it's been really very seamless. We did a lot of communication in August, preparing staff or parents and students for the fact that cell phones were not allowed from first bell to last bell, and that they were going to have lockers and backpacks. So a lot of the parents and students were prepared for that when they came in. They weren't surprised. We took the first couple of weeks to continue to reteach the behaviors. And same as Mr. Randall, first assembly we were there, and there was not a single cell phone to be seen. And the kids were sitting engaged and excited to be there. And so staff has been it's been really pretty smooth. I can count on one hand how many times I've had to talk to a student or students about cell phones, because they know they've had the 2 weeks of warning, and they know from this point on that if it's out, it's taken to the office. So it's really very black and white for them. Parents have been very supportive. I've gotten quite a few emails from parents supporting the new implementation of the cell phone policy at Woodland as well. So overall, I would see it's very positive, and the staff have all said we do not want to go back. I think there's still some students. I also am dealing with a little younger demographic, right? And so I think there's a few students that are still, they hit me up every now and then and say, hey, can we switch back? And I'm like, nope, we're not going back. So that's kind of where we are.
It sounds like amazing results. I'm so excited about this. And the locker thing, that's exactly what I did when I was in school. Granted, it was a long time ago and we didn't have phones then, but it's good for kids to learn those organizational skills.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing I was reminded when you were both speaking about how much time, there's a stat, don't quote me, but I think it's 21 days or 28 days to create a new habit. And so we're kind of getting to that. But once that habit is established, I think while we don't love lots of noise, it's great to see kids communicating with each other. And I would venture to say any kind of behavior disruptions are going to decline dramatically. So thank you both for jumping on board and and implementing this. And I think it's a good example to everybody else in the district. And thank you.
Thank you.
Great job. I think what everybody, when you initially say this, their concern goes to security. And I'm reminded that maybe I'm not like a young adult anymore. So I actually grew up without having cell phones, and I'm kind of in the minority. Have you heard, have any parents or, given you feedback like that's a concern? Because I saw something this weekend where, a chief of, SROs or captain or whatever is like, I would much rather have kids in the unfortunate event where there is, God forbid, something bad happening. His comments was, I would much rather have kids not glued to their phone, and alert. And I'd never really thought about that. So I'm just curious, of all the people, when I hear pushback on this, people's concern, and I get it, is safety. Do you have any comments, or have we had any feedback from our SROs about that?
I've not had any concerns about safety. We do have a phone that students can use, and they do sometimes come up and use it at lunch and call their parents. We also let the parents know that you can call at any time and get a message to your student at the school. As far as the SRO, he was in the meeting when we were when I was with my counselors and discussed the cell phones, and he was very much on board. He had very much the same mindset of he would rather have the cell phones put away and have them be able to pay attention and follow directions in an emergency situation. And then once that emergency situation is handled, being able to give them the cell phones to contact parents and let them know, hey, I'm good, this is where I'm at. So that's been my experience.
Cool. I think we just want to make sure that it's clear to parents, like, we empathize with that, and we would not do something without vetting that. But this upside just sounds terrific. Cool. So we've got 3 schools that are giving it solid B pluses or A's. Guess what's the next step?
Well, trustees, this is being implemented in all of the schools. We just had a couple come and choose to share out today. I think the latest update that I'll share with you, like on the Yonder pouches, we were initially thinking about piloting that in a couple of schools over the summer, and so we were writing some grants and trying to obtain that funding. And in that process, we have quickly learned, I think Melissa could testify, she was one of the schools that was going to maybe pilot the Yonder. What's happening right now is working really well. We're not so sure if that's the right step next. It still could be, and maybe that's something we choose to pilot in a different campus, but all of the schools are making this a specific focus. And I think the general consensus is just about the same as what you're hearing today. It's going pretty well.
Cool. Thank you all.
What about lunches at some of the other schools? I mean, is that an emphasis? Because that's where I get concerned. Is again, I love what you both just shared about lunches, but I wonder if that's consistent across the board.
I think we can. Well, and Trent's not here today, but I believe the high schools are allowing cell phones to be used during lunch, and I think it's even allowed, right, Mike, at passing periods. So they're not being policed per se there, but what they're seeing is what you're hearing today. The middle schools are not allowing cell phones pretty much all day. So lunch is not an option at the middle schools, and the elementary schools haven't really been an issue in the past. The few students that may bring a cell phone to an elementary class, it's easy for that teacher to specifically ask that student to set the cell phone in a basket that's on her desk or something, and that's what we're seeing happening.
Way of life.
Yeah, I think, and hopefully maybe with high school, as they get used to this, they'll want to use their cell phones less during the day. I mean, that should be the goal. I like, Melissa, that your kids don't have them all day. There's a freedom in that. Make sure I'm on. I remember when my daughter was in 7th grade, so that was quite a while ago. She's 30 now. And the cell phone back then, there wasn't a smartphone. It was just a little flip phone. It was a lot of stress. So this is going to alleviate a lot of, like you said, the drama over whatever they got to deal with today. TikTok and whatever other stuff is out there.
Whoa, did you say TikTok?
Yeah, I don't have it,
That's
but
pretty
I know
impressive.
it's there. So anyways, I just think this is just the best thing for kids. And although they may not realize that today, in 28 days, they will, and they'll feel a lot better about it.
I guess, Dr. Harker, I would just point out that our procedures, though, really leave that 6th to 8th grade demographic, like at lunch, at principal discretion. And so that concerns me that we have one school that, instead of it being district-wide. So I'm a little concerned just about the fact that it isn't necessarily consistent across the board. So
I'd like to see it consistent across the board.
Thank you.
yeah, so something just to point out and for your team to maybe. Allie, Trustee Anderton.
I was just saying yes. Rebecca, I agree, and I have the same concern.
Yeah, thanks.
I appreciate hearing how it's going from a few schools, and I know all the schools have been focusing on this. Thank you to our administrators and teachers for, and I actually kind of like the different schools are trying different things, and then it allows to share ideas, but honestly, especially between middle school and high school, it could be just different things are going to work better. So anyway, that was awesome. Thank you.
So where do we move forward if we have concerns about different policies?
Well, the reference that Chair Smith is discussing is a procedure, not a policy. So it's something we can change right away. So I think really what we want to do, we're just barely back to school and really just trying to monitor and want to give the board a first update. You have a good base policy. You've seen your specific policy, and we have this procedure in place. I think we should just give it another few weeks, and let's continue that conversation with our schools. To my knowledge, and Trent wishes he could be here, and he's really been taking the lead on this specific conversation. But and maybe Melissa knows, but I think all of the middle schools are following. It's not allowed at lunch. But maybe I'm wrong. Mike, am I wrong? As soon as I say that, it sounds like maybe I don't know. I guess we'll get you more information. How about we just do that? We'll just get you more information specifically on what all the schools are specifically doing, especially at the middle school level, and then we can make some additional conversations. And again, that's a procedure that we can just update and we can put into place pretty much anytime.
Cool. Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Oh,
I think
go
Melissa's
ahead.
got one more thing to add. Thanks, Melissa. Didn't want to put you on the spot.
No, I would say the one piece that I would just add, so I've been through this process at my previous district where they changed the policy. And so we as administrators had to maneuver that. And one of the things that I've noticed in that experience and also my experience here is making sure that we allow the administrators and the staff to have the time to communicate out and to the parents and the students and teach them. It's much more successful, I would say, if you allow that time for really good communication to prepare instead of just saying, hey, we're going to do this, boom, tomorrow. And that's sometimes when things can get kind of messy and gray. And so I guess that would just be my one suggestion is if you're looking to make some changes, making sure that we have good communication and the time to teach our community about what we're expecting of them in the process.
Yes, thank you for that great comment. Yes, I don't want to get ahead of myself either. So thank you. Absolutely. If you're going to make a change, you want to make sure you have the groundwork laid properly.
Thank you. All right. Thank you both. All right. Shannon, finance update.
You actually get me first.
Terrific. Welcome, Seth.
Thank you. Sorry to scare you there, Jimmy. All right. Well, I get to do the introduction, and then you will get Shannon to give you some of the details. But we're going to go over last year's budget and the unaudited actuals for 2023-24. And so first off, I just wanted to give you a quick overview.
Can I just jump in and ask, when is our audit for this fiscal year?
So they're mostly complete by now. You will get a presentation probably in November.
On the audited.
On the audited financials. So this is the unaudited.
Okay, thanks.
So I think the first thing I just wanted to highlight, over the years, one thing that we've heard often from the community is around tightening our belts. So controlling spending, keeping our costs as low as possible. And I think as Shannon goes through the unaudited ending balances, you'll see that what we're doing is working. All of our departments and schools have been doing a lot of work to control costs and save where they can. And I think you'll see evidence of that in Shannon's presentation. Also, we are more stable financially today than we were earlier this year when we went through such difficult process to cut $6 million from our anticipated shortfall for this fiscal year. And then I also wanted to mention just some of the hard work that goes in behind the scenes. This is the result of a lot of our departments and schools working very closely together. And I especially wanted to shout out our human resources and finance departments, because they went back through, audited themselves a lot of the things that we were doing, implemented some new controls. In one case, there was, we went back 3 years and were able to recapture some funding from the state because we found out that in the case of some of our administrators, we weren't getting all of their credits from out of state adequately reflected. And so they went back 3 years, did that work, got additional revenues from the state as a result. So this whole thing is a team effort, of course, but especially our human resources and finances teams have done a lot of work to get to this point. And then lastly, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the Smarter School Spending program. That was something that we started working on last year. That continues to inform some of the work that we're doing. You'll see that referenced in the budget book that Shannon and her team have put together. That really will continue to influence us as we move forward and as we look at priorities and different things when we put together our budget. So I just wanted to kick it off with that overview, and then I'll turn it over to Shannon to give you some of the detail.
Alrighty, good evening. And yeah, as far as when we present unaudited actuals, audit is going really well, and mainly for the differences with audit, they'll do some reconciliation with property taxes, and then they do a lot of these things called conversion entries, where they get our fund financials into a more, they kind of make it the private version where you see capital assets on the books and debt service. So that's kind of what the auditors do. So I am going to dive in. Now, this is just general fund for now, reviewing. We'll look at revenues first, then look into expenditures, and then end with the ending fund balance. So as far as revenues go, let me get a nice little pointer. What we're presenting here is we have the FY24, the revised budget. Now that is what you approved along with the 2024-25 budget. That really is a testament to doing the working budget, not just adopting it, but making sure we're on track for the year, noting any changes, and especially it's pretty crucial to revise your budget after fall when you've got all your staffing kind of settled for the year. So we, probably the biggest, most notable revision to the budget was the one-time supplemental revenue from the state that we budgeted for $3.1 million. Actually, in July, it came in at $3.5 million. Our ADA was even better, and the state ADA, average daily attendance, was even better. So even an additional boost, and that really helped. It's one-time funding, but really helping our ending fund balance and making sure that our finances are a little more stable and we have healthier cash flow. So we've closed the books now, and our unaudited actuals, we're showing revenue of almost $900,000 more. And really, you know, the next slide will go into all those variances, but that's about a little less than a 1% error rate, and it's on the good. We got a little more revenue than anticipated. So let's review what that was. All right, so first, local revenue changes. Now, local revenue, the majority is our supplemental replacement levy of $25 million. But there are some, we have interest in there, and so we keep most of our cash on the state level in their treasury pool, and it was all-time highs for interest rates this year, which is, it's one time, but it was great. So we got even more than anticipated. We did revise our budget to $1.4 million. We actually got $1.6 million in interest. When I started, it was at $200,000. So going forward in the FY25 budget, we're still on the conservative side of using a 3-year average, so more around 3% interest. Probably won't be seeing those 5.5% interest rates forever, but great one-time revenue that really can help, go towards much needed equipment or facilities. And then you'll see some tax variances, and that is all an accounting thing. For property taxes, anything that's not received 60 days after the fiscal year end, so August 30th, we actually have to defer it. We can't count it as revenue. We will get it, but that is a full accounting thing, so hard to show that, but rest assured, we'll get that revenue. It's just part of accounting, which is the stuff I love. So in all, local revenue differences were $18,000. I also wanted to show you kind of what one-time differences will be and what ongoing differences in the budget will be. And that will, that can show the impact of what FY25 will look like. So that it's more on the expenditure side. That will be helpful. Now, as far as state revenues go, of course, our first line item is the increase in the one-time supplemental appropriation. We budgeted for $3.1 million. We actually got around $3.5 million, which is amazing. And then we have, we have 2 prior year one-time corrections. One being the state actually revised support units. So that helped us out a little bit. They gave us about 1 support unit more for a prior year. But we also audited, as Seth mentioned, administrative experience, which is part of salary-based apportionment. And so we were able to recoup some of prior year funding for that, which is great. Anything that can help, and it's pretty high amounts. So in all, you'll see the main difference of the state revenue increase from the budget, or the state is really the main increase for the budget, and mainly one time.
About how much of that is the correction versus the support unit?
About half and half, yeah. Alrighty, so the variance, I like to point out what the one-time variance was, and that was 0.82%.
Trustee Anderson, did you have a question?
No, sorry.
All right, so moving on from revenues is the expenditure side. Nope, hit too fast. All right, so kind of same format as revenues. We're presenting the amended budget in this column. And then we have the unaudited actuals, so where we ended the year with our actuals. And so another positive, we have $2.3 million less expenditures than what's budgeted. And that is a 2.26% error rate. And kind of you can see the main categories for those variances, capital outlay, just one big expenditure can really increase the variance, but we'll review them on the next slide. All right, I tried to summarize as best as possible, but my team and I are reviewing thousands and thousands of account streams and lots of budgets and a lot of salaries. So this is as summarized as we can get, but we'll go over them. And again, just how to read this, I wanted to capture kind of the budget category, the main area. I wanted to show if we were over budget, that's a negative. Under budget, that's good, that's a positive. I want to explain what is one-time differences. So really, are the savings, or if it's over budget, is it a one-time thing, or can we expect that ongoing in the for next fiscal year? And there's an ongoing difference. And then carryover into FY25. We typically have maybe around $1 million in carryover for departments and buildings each year, so it's pretty common. So I just wanted to show you what carryover. It's not in the adopted budget, but when we do our fall working budget, that's when I add in the carryover. And then just some asterisks and notes. If it has an asterisk, it has been reflected in the FY25 adopted budget already, and it probably relates to our budget prioritization and reduction measures. And then if it doesn't, it is either a nice surprise or actually something that we're going to have to increase the budget for. And then just wanted to point out the one-time difference in the cost savings, the variance is a 1.26% error rate. So the first line item is our child nutrition deficit. We actually went over budget for that just because it's really a true up to cover unpaid meals. So we all know kind of the state of the finances. The silver lining on that, it's going to be one time. When we accepted the SFE's proposal, hopefully we'll break even. Now that's assuming 100% collection of student meals, but we're already seeing some great increase in participation. So really that's going to be super helpful for the general fund. So we're putting that as a one-time cost increase. Custodial, we had a savings of around $80,000, and that was intentional. That's an ongoing difference, and that was part of our budget reduction to kind of eliminate the vacancies that we were holding on to, hoping we could fill, and really accepting the cost savings of the third-party contracts. However, we will always each year make sure that still is a cost savings to us. Department budgets. Almost all of it is carryover, mainly in for a safety project, but you can see around $200,000. We had increase in Medicaid billing revenue. It's confusing why that's in expenditures, but as our revenue increases for Medicaid, our match increases. The general fund has to contribute about 30% of the revenue for Medicaid. So as revenue increases, expenditures increase, our net revenue would be around a little less than $70,000 for Medicaid billing reimbursement. Maintenance and grounds, we had a cost savings of a little less than $200,000. It's one time, mainly because we are really able to utilize our Fund 430, our plant facilities fund, to help with some projects and kind of reduce some of the deferred maintenance that the maintenance budget typically takes care of. So we are going to carry that over, and they are going to be able to purchase some much needed equipment. And then proud of this one, the net change in all salaries and benefits, really, your main assignments that you budget for, just a little less than $200,000 in savings. Our budget is 85%. There's a lot of salaries and budgets to track, so pretty proud of both. It's just a testament to the HR team and the payroll team and the finance team being able to really establish physician control, doing a lot of verifying assignments, schedules, and making sure the budget is on track and payroll's on track. General fund contribution savings, really what that is at when we did the FY24 budget, we did those $6,000 salary increases, and we identified that the general fund would have to help contribute to other funds to help cover that costs in salaries. Throughout the year, we either identified that maybe we got a little more state and federal revenue, we had some carryover from the prior year for that, or we transferred some of those expenditures to the general fund. All right, school building budgets, a carryover, pretty typical to have that amount of carryover. And so school buildings, they can carry over up to 10% of their budget into next year. Our special education contract agencies, what that means over encumbered is that when the contracts make the budget, right? We see how many contracts we have. As we open them, we have to increase the budget. And what we see is we have to do a not to exceed amount. So we have to see when those contractors are coming, their billable rate, how many hours they could be scheduled up to, how many days. So that just shows us that we didn't fully utilize those contracts, and we'll do an audit to see kind of, is there a percentage that we know we won't use to make sure we don't have that kind of variance, as big a variance of that. And so that I put that as an ongoing difference because the contracts that we have are what make the budget, and so we'll analyze it better and see, okay, are we really going to have to budget for all of this or not? State athletic travel, it's a good problem to have. Our student athletes are amazing. However, transportation and hotels are very expensive and continue to rise. So I put this as an ongoing difference. We're going to have to increase that athletic budget. Good problem to have, but it's just we've typically had $300,000 as an earmark over the past, 5 years for athletic travel, and it's just a testament of inflation. We should have been increasing it.
That was deal money from Southern Idaho.
Another kind of a huge portion of kind of position control and identifying areas for cost savings was in substitutes. Did a kind of huge work from the payroll and HR department to make sure subs were being used only for positions that we have and not, positions that we don't have for extra support. So we were really able to reduce the sub costs by a little more than $200,000. And then so that is an ongoing difference that is in the FY25 budget already. Transportation. So half of the savings comes from we didn't fill 3 drivers and 1 bus assistant. And the other has to do with kind of an over budget of extra hours for bus drivers. It's really hard to identify how many extra hours we'll need, especially with athletics and just other items. So it's a goal of mine to dive into that variance a little more and see why we had more hours a couple of years ago and why we didn't experience as many hours for FY24. So that's a goal for this upcoming year. Utilities, we had a $30,000 phone savings, and that Seth being able to negotiate that contract down. So kudos to Seth and his team. And then vacancies, we had a third-party contract for psychs and speech language pathologists, and so this savings is super intentional. We only used half of that contract last year, and we're going to use the remaining half this year, so that's a carryover. And it's a one-time carryover. And then we had some great work on the HR side. They were really able to put some great practices and procedures for workers' comp in place, and so we had some savings for one time from the prior year as our workers' comp, our I won't say XMod because some people don't know what that is, but our rates are going down. This is the last year where some prior year experience and loss will be on our workers' comp policy, but next year we should see even lower workers' comp rates. So in all, one-time variances of 1.25 million, ongoing. The majority is already reflected in the FY25 budget, but a little less than $1 million. And then out of those one-time variances, about most of it will be either carryover. Any questions on that, on the expenditure side? This lives on this. Yeah, we can absolutely put it under there. Yeah. Okay, so what does this mean for our ending fund balance? So our ending fund balance is, you know, the assets, cash, and other stuff that we have at the beginning of the year, plus our revenues minus our expenditures, how we ended the year. Sorry, went too fast. Okay, so we started the year with a little less than $7 million in our ending fund balance. And what that really meant in terms of, if we think about it as, you know, 1 month of our operating expenditures, it covered only 0.8 of that. So that was definitely a big concern that we had, you know, going throughout the year. So we then add our revenues from that first slide to that and subtract our expenditures. And what we get is, you know, revenues and expenditures is either our surplus or our deficit. And we add that to the beginning fund balance. So with the amended budget, we were expecting a surplus of $3.5 million. Mainly, that's that one-time supplemental appropriation, leaving us with an ending fund balance of around $10.4 million. However, with unaudited actuals, we saw that we had a little less than $1 million increase in revenue on a one-time basis. And then we saw from our expenditure side that we had $2.2 million of cost savings, $1.3 million of that in one-time, ongoing difference of a little less than $1 million, knowing that, you know, out of that 1.2 million, 1.7 million is carryover. So that's going to increase our expenditures for FY25 on an ongoing basis. It's not in the adopted budget yet. So that leaves us with 13.5 million as an ending balance.
1.7 of which is carryover.
Yeah. And so I'm going to show you how that impacts that 13.5 right here. So this isn't all just cash, you know, that the district has. Out of this 13.5 million, that carryover takes away what we can use on that. Then the second line item is, I think we have to remember that we budgeted for lottery revenue. It's about $1 million each year, but we're not going to receive it. And that has to do with the school facility modernization funds. The state diverted lottery funding to help with those, you know, they're going to do bond sales of $1 billion, and they use lottery to help fund that, taking away the lottery funds that we use for our maintenance salaries and routine maintenance. And that's about, the lottery covered 40% of that budget. So we don't have a fix yet for those revenues, but we identified we can do a temporary 2-year solution and hold on to $2 million to help fund that missing lottery funding. Which leads us to, so we take that $2 million out of that 13.5. We have to hold on to 5% of our, so we take what our budget, our revenues were for the year, and we have to hold on to that as part of our contingency funds to, you know, help. It's in code, and just in case there's an emergency where we can't cover payroll. We do know that payroll is more than $5 million, as well as our monthly operating expenditures. And then so once we take out our carryover, the assignment for the loss and lottery funding, our required contingency, that leaves a little more than $5 million, which in accounting terms it's called unassigned. And that's really what you have. It's almost like your savings account, not restricted for anything, but it's for, investment or, whatever purpose, the board strives for. So that is the component, that's what's called the components of our ending fund balance. So really, we can think of contingency and unassigned. When they're added together, that's really what we have to work with for, making sure our cash flows can cover a month of payroll, operating expenditures, emergencies, and then future investments. It's one time, so when we say future investments, best practices not to identify ongoing expenditures with your ending fund balance. What that 10.4 million means, 1 plus 2, I kind of put some formulas in there. It means that it covers a little less than 11% of our total budgeted expenditures for next year. Or it covers 1.3 months of operating expenditures, so payroll and other non-payroll costs. The Government Finance Officers Association, who is, we're using their Smarter School Spending program. Their best practices, their manuals are going to recommend a government agency has 2 months of reserves. There have been a lot of kind of journals and published articles from GFOA to really identify, is that still best practice if the governmental agency knows that its revenues won't be deferred, right? That the state, you can anticipate that you'll always get your revenues first from the state and property taxes. And really more of the best practices lean towards your cash flow and making sure you have a healthy cash flow, as well as being able to handle weather some emergencies. It might not mean full deferrals of revenue that other states might have had experienced during crashes. Any question on our ending fund balance then? I would say it is, I think we can breathe a little bit with.
So that was my question. Does 1.3 months of operating expenses, I know you were a little worried about cash flow in July.
Yep. No, this gets rid of our cash flow concerns. 1.25 I think is a great goal for the district to have. So having 1.3 is great. And I think, we'll always have to make sure that, we're not going under as our expenditures increase in time. There's going to have to be a multi-year look of what we need in order for those cash flows and to be comfortable with emergencies and, how much we want for future investments. So, but no, what a turn of events, it's that the one-time supplemental was, I know we were, throughout legislation session, some weeks it didn't sound very good. Other weeks it sounded great. So it's definitely a blessing to have that. Yeah, it's we have 2 years of a fix, but it's something that we're going to have to prioritize as we get more state funding, making sure that we have that set aside to cover that lottery funding. And it doesn't sound like it's going to be part of the session this year. They're really focusing on just that facilities funding, HB 521. So I would say don't expect it to. I know some districts have advocated for having them restore it. I wouldn't expect that in the session. So. All right, and then just wanted to show you kind of some visualization of the fund balance. If you just look at the fund balance in terms of the millions, it looks like it's been the highest it's ever been. But we know over the course of 10 plus years, our expenditures have increased by quite a bit. So It's more transparent to look at the ending fund balance as a percentage of expenditures. So we see we've restored it to a much more healthy balance to cover expenditures. And then if you look at it as terms of how many months of operating expenditures it can cover, not two, but definitely a healthier range. So what are the next steps? So auditors are within the next couple weeks finalizing our audit. In October, we'll have that draft, and then the audit committee will meet to go over it. And the Hayden Ross, our auditors, the partner Tony Matson, will review that with us. And then we'll continue our Smarter School Spending Program. In November, Tony will come and do his audit presentation. And then we'll get that posted on the website as well. And then in December, we will be able to have our first working budget. Really what the biggest snapshot that we need is the first Friday in November to know what our funded average daily attendance is. And that starts the ball rolling with getting our budget revised and starting next year's budget already. So that is, carryover funds will be integrated in that, and then a full staffing audit will be done in October. So that is what you can expect for the fall in terms from the finance department. All right, and then I am a little over time, but good thing I only need a couple more minutes, and that is it. With you is a draft of our budget book.
That's what I was going to ask.
Yeah, it says draft because, yeah. I'm an accountant, so there might be some grammar issues that the instructional brilliant side of the house is helping me review, but we'll get that posted within the next day or two to the website. Please review, and I can answer questions through email. We can do like weekly board note sessions, but really what that encompasses, it's a more friendly version of that big old budget state template that's posted online right now. It provides narrative. It explains each program that's in our general fund. It explains all our other funds. It shows how much staffing that we have, an analysis of things that might have changed from last year to this year. And there's a special section dedicated to our prioritized budget reductions for FY25. It provides a narrative to what we had posted instead of just some Excel sheet. It really provides the why behind some of those reductions. So I hope it makes it a little more user friendly and kind of just provides some more historical evidence of what we did. And then you'll see some enrollment trends and a lot of good stuff. So enjoy. Thanks.
Thanks, Shannon.
Terrific. Thanks, Shannon. Thank you.
Thank you for going above and beyond, Shannon, to make that available to us.
So Stephanie, there's a lot there. If you can just find a way to get that expenditure stuff out to the cable news world, that would be very helpful.
Yes.
Maybe the radio, I guess, for a couple people that use radio.
All right. Well, thanks. Seth, 10-year facility maintenance plan.
Thank you, and I'll try to go fast to be respectful of your time. Trustee McAndrew, I've been asked to remind you to use your mic as well. Just future note. It's my pleasure to present to you the draft 10-year facility maintenance plan for information. I'll be sharing a finalized version next month. A copy of my presentation as well as that draft plan is in board docs for your review. Just to give a quick background, we have about 22 total campuses throughout the cities of Hayden, Dalton Gardens, and Coeur d'Alene. That includes 10 elementary schools, 3 middle schools, 2 comprehensive high schools, an alternative academy. We serve the juvenile correction facility in conjunction with Kootenai County. We've got an early learning center and 4 non-instructional facilities. I just wanted to give you some idea of the scope of our facilities. That includes 1.3 million square feet in buildings, 2 million square feet of parking lots and roads, over 11 million square feet of sports, play fields, outdoor areas, also 350,000 square feet of sport courts and walkways, and 160,000 square feet of shrubs and trees. So it's a lot that we are maintaining for our students in the community. There's a lot of work that goes into all of these facilities. In terms of values, I've just updated some of these numbers. So Trustee Tenbrink, who was at Long Range Planning, these might look a little different than what I presented to them. The overall replacement value of all of our facilities, if we had to build them today from scratch, is around $430 million. The estimated value of all of our property and facilities, if we had to go buy new property and build facilities on them, is over $1 billion now. So this is a tremendous asset to our students and the community. And I just wanted to highlight that as we talk about deferred maintenance, because replacement value is an important figure as part of that. Currently, we've got about $60 million in deferred maintenance needs. And I know a few years ago, the board had talked a lot about deferred maintenance as we looked at a school plant facilities levy. And so I'm just kind of coming back and updating some of those numbers for you. The average age of our building is over 30 years old. And if you think about a house that's 30 years old, as your house gets to be about 30 years, there's a lot of stuff that has to be replaced. Roofs, HVAC units, water heaters, there's all kinds of things around that age. Our buildings are starting to get over that age now, which is why you see that dollar amount increasing in terms of deferred maintenance needs. So House Bill 521, which Shannon mentioned a little bit earlier, allocated over $1 billion for school facilities in the state. Our plan is to submit a draft plan to the state in October. And I just wanted to remind all of you that we use a database called Amoresco that's used widely by many public entities and large organizations, where we put all of our buildings and all the different systems in there, and then it helps us develop a long-term plan to get some of those things replaced in a timely manner. Our district will receive about $36 million in one-time funding to cover 10 years of facilities needs, and $26 million of that is new funding. So as Shannon mentioned, they took some of our lottery funding that we were using and reallocated it to the modernization fund. So that means we've got to replace some of that money elsewhere. So it gets really confusing when you talk about some of this stuff because much of it is labeled very similarly. So this is the School Modernization Facilities Fund. There's another related House bill that actually is more property tax relief, but it also has the words school and facilities and fund in it as well, so that makes it extra confusing. An annual report is required from us to the State Department of Education, and I just put some of the language of the law in there because we are restricted on what we can do with some of those $36 million in one-time funds. It shall be used for school facility construction, renovation, or maintenance needs. So it's mostly capital projects, things that are going to last for longer than 7 years. It also explicitly says that all funds shall be used for school facilities directly related to the school district's core educational mission. No funds shall be used for facilities with a primary athletic purpose. So in talking to the state about that sentence in particular, their concern is that it not be used to fund like turf fields, stuff like that wouldn't be used for classes the majority of the time. So our plan is to be really careful and thoughtful about how we use those funds. You know, we've got a lot of needs at some of our athletic facilities. Our tennis courts and tracks are two main examples. And so while we may recommend to you that we replace those at some point, my preference would be if we do that, we have a lot of data to support it in case the state balks at that. So more to come on that. in case you're not familiar, we use what's called the Facilities Condition Index, or FCI. This has been around for a long time. It was actually started by the U.S. Navy and then adopted by universities in the 1990s. What it is it's the cost of renewal needs and deferred maintenance divided by the replacement value for the building, and then multiplied by 100 to get a percentage. So if a building's in the 0 to 5% range, that would be good condition. If it's 5 to 10%, it would be fair. 10 to 30% would be poor. And if it's over 30%, then it's critical, and you really need to address some of the issues with that building. Say that again? Well, the replacement value is part of the calculation. So you can see the formula over there on the left. You put the renewal costs and the deferred maintenance costs on top. You divide that by the current replacement value of the building, and then that gives you a score for each building according to those percentages. So in our district, I just put the buildings up here with an FCI score of above 10%. We've got 9 different buildings that are above 10% currently. About half of them are schools and half of them are non-instructional buildings. So both of those, I think, should be priorities for us. Some of these buildings, their score might come down because we haven't put our most recent projects in here yet. So like this summer, we did some projects at Canfield Middle School. That'll bring their score down a little bit. Fernand STEM Academy had some projects done at it. Hayden Meadows had a few projects, so roofs and HVAC. So all those scores will probably come down a little bit. My biggest concerns right now are those non-instructional buildings because we have not done anything at them in a long time. So like transportation, tech depot, maintenance, and then the district office I'll talk to you more about next month. In terms of what our FCI looks like over time, this kind of colored graph here shows those different percentages and then where our buildings are at on them. So right now, district-wide, our average FCI is about 11%. So that's getting into that poor range. If we did nothing, so if we didn't fund any facilities projects at all, that black line represents where we would be in 10 years, moving up closer as a district, so all of our facilities to that critical line. That blue line represents the funding that we're planning to spend with some of the state modernization money. So if we spend about $4.5 million a year, we've traditionally done roughly $1 million a year plus about $3 million a year from the state. That'll keep it on a flatter trajectory. So it's not going to drop us down into that lower range, but it is going to keep it relatively flat for the next 10 years while we figure out how to fund the rest of those needs. So it stops that kind of upward spike getting into the critical area, but it doesn't stop it completely. So we will still have some unaddressed needs even with this funding. And then this is just a look at our deferred maintenance needs currently. So you can see we've got quite a big backlog of deferred maintenance. That's that $60 million. In Ameresco, it's broken down by category. The biggest category always is going to be like HVAC. So that's that kind of purple part of the bar that's about $20 million there on the far left. It's also broken out into other different categories. This is also how the state wants their 10-year plan, which I'll show you that draft in just a second. So this is actually looking out further than 10 years. You can see how it's categorized. But what Ameresco does for us is when we install an HVAC system, let's say, we put in the expected lifespan of that HVAC system, and then it tells us, okay, that's going to need to be replaced in 2050, and so that goes on the list, 20 or 30 years out. And then I just wanted to put a couple high priority projects that I know about on your radar. All of these will come back to you at some point as RFP awards or request for bid awards. We have many high priority projects, but these are the highest priority at this point. We have a septic system at Dalton that really needs to get replaced, some HVAC at Lake City, Lakes and Hayden Meadows, some roofs at Atlas and Venture. I'm not sure if you've driven the parking lots at Lake City and Ramsey, but that's been on the list for a while. They're starting to turn to gravel. Transportation bathrooms is actually one I'm working on right now, so that one may happen before we even receive this funding from the state. They also have a storage building that is getting close to being condemned, so we ought to look at taking that out. Maintenance, which is right next door, really needs some exterior paint and repair. It's starting to get to the point where it's going to affect the inside of the building if we don't take care of the outside soon. And then we've got a sprinkler system at Canfield that really needs to get addressed too. So those are, in talking to the teams, those are some of the highest priority. These are all projects that we probably will look at doing next summer. That's probably about all we would have capacity for with the staff that we have. Because even as we hire stuff out, it's really hard to coordinate all that work. And, there's just a lot of moving pieces. So in your packet is a draft copy of the plan. So this is the format we have to submit to the state. Really what it does is it goes year by year for each building and then category by category. You can see on the draft plan that we still have our deferred maintenance from FY23, so from prior years. So I'm working right now to get all that updated with Amoresco. And so at your October meeting, I'll have an updated version of this for approval to submit to the state. I just wanted to get a draft in front of you so you could look at it prior to then. According to the state, we can submit this plan as many times as we want. We can keep updating it. We already know that we have more needs than the money they're going to give us. So in some ways, this doesn't necessarily even matter. They just need to see it so that they can see, okay, yes, you have $36 million of needs. I'm not sure what they're going to be doing with the rest of that data. My hope is that they use that to then advocate for more facilities funding to help districts address all the deferred maintenance needs that are out there. That's what I had for you. It was kind of an informational thing, maybe a little bit of homework, and then I'll come back to you next month with an updated version of this. So I'll stand for any questions.
What that one list of priorities, what's the cost on that, would you expect?
This one right here?
Yeah.
I'd have to go dig into all the details. We're shooting for about 3.5 million a year. So my guess would be that's probably getting a little bit close to that. HVAC especially is very, very expensive.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much. All right.
Last but not least.
Next up is our assessment update.
Chair Smith, you mean the last thing on our agenda is our assessment update?
Yes.
Good evening again. For this month's assessment report, we wanted to remind you about our district's data dashboard. It's conveniently located at cdaschools.org and contains all of the performance data for our staff and students. These data are maintained regularly and allows anybody to transparently see the demographics and growth within a school year. Before the demonstration, she was here a little earlier and I wanted to point her out to you, but Mrs. Shelley Blank has been hired as our assessment coordinator at the district level. She's an over 20-year educator in our district, serving in elementary, middle school, and high school, so she understands the games at each of those levels and how important it is to have qualifying assessments that let our teachers know how students are performing. She's now learning the ropes of our assessment world, and we are excited that she's going to be able to help present some of these data to you in the future as well. So hopefully you get a chance to be able to meet her along the way. I'm going to just bring up a new window, and I'm going to navigate to cdaschools.org, our public webpage. Come on. So once you are here, there is a search button on the right-hand side. It is buried within this huge Explore menu that we have, but I found it easier to just go up here to the search bar, just type in Data Dashboard. If I click in the right box, it will probably help. And I didn't even spell it right, but I got it. Okay. So this is our embedded data dashboard, and you'll notice that it has 4 tiles available for you: elementary, middle school, high school, and a district-wide dashboard. I just want to take a quick tour of each one and make sure that we're completed at today's meeting. You notice, of course, from our strategic plan work that we're keeping a close eye on mathematics. It's in this guy here inside. We've focused on mathematics for several years along the way. So let's start in elementary. One of the metrics that we see in elementary is that all students in kindergarten through grade 5 take a progress monitoring assessment called iReady 3 times a year: fall, winter, and spring. And there's a tile right here that says percentage of students at grade level on iReady Math. If you click on that KPI, you'll notice that this was going to start populating with a series of graphs. Should be populating with a series of graphs. Something's happening in there. There they are. And right away, you'll be able to see over the last 4 years how students are performing in this particular assessment. We have a legend down here at the bottom below the graph, which talks about fall, winter, spring. And you can see these are the percentages of students who are at grade level in each of these school years. And you can see the exponential growth that students have from fall to spring. So if you're looking at how students are performing year over year, you could just look at spring to spring to spring to spring, if you wish, in each of the benchmarks. But it's also important for us because we have in our strategic plan that we want to also focus on how are students receiving services with disabilities, or how are students in the Alaska Native American subgroup are going. Well, you can come down the way and you can see all of these data that compare our spring scores by different subgroups. And we can look and see this light blue. It's hard to see on the legend, but the light blue is all students, and we can see how different groups performed relative to that group. As you scroll down, you'll also be able to see it by income level, by program, by gender, all kinds of different ways for you to see it. But most people will stay just here at the very top to see how we're performing. If you're done with elementary, you can just go back to the KPI or hit back on your browser button. Let's go to middle school. We recognize that our staff makes the meaningful difference in the lives of others each day, and that we invest a great deal of time and resources to make sure that our staff has the best possible impact on achievement. So if we go to the middle school dashboard, we can go down toward the bottom and you can see a button that says Staff Years of Service. And I know this graph is familiar to you because we've shown it in a different way for you, but there are bands here that show the 5-year years of service by building live at any one time. And we can see that our youngest staff, our newest staff, is at Lakes Middle School, and our most esteemed staff is at Canfield Middle School comparative. As you hover over the bars, it will tell you the percentage in each band. Again, these are live data, regularly updated. Let's go back to our dashboard and let's go over to high school. And as you know, we're paid for average daily attendance. So we carefully monitor the percentage of students who are regularly coming. So we can look at attendance. And we have a graph for the percentage of students with 90% or greater attendance. And real time, this is comparative year over year. And we can see the lag that we had over the previous 2 years post-COVID and where we were at this last school year. Once we get a month's worth of data in, we'll be able to have a new column up there which shows how we're performing relative to this year. Again, we can also break this down and we can take a look at it by federal race code, by program area, and by gender.
Mr. Nelson?
Yes?
Is there a way to see when a particular thing was last updated?
So they're live. So average daily attendance would be there. Are you looking for a particular metric? Almost all of them include.
As I'm looking at these, I'm just wondering when, like So, no.
Okay.
Is that-
I can certainly double check if there's
Okay.
something that catches your eye that you need to have a specific updated date, but
Oh, sure. No, I was just wondering if it was in the data, but okay. Thank you.
the data would be relative to the x-axis, so the one going left to right would tell you the years that are being represented within that. If for whatever reason we need to be more clear,
So
we
like
can.
the average daily attendance, I assume we'll put a 20 whatever.
Correct. After September, we'll see a 2025 pop up.
But then when will that be updated?
Daily.
After that, daily.
We just need to have a representative sample to be able to calculate it.
Okay.
So overall, I just wanted to give you a heads up as to what that data dashboard is and remind you that we have a lot of flexibility to put additional KPIs or key performance indicators that we as a school district are heavily interested in. You'll find right now we have about 45 total KPIs available in each of those 4 dashboard areas. But I will be more than glad to stand for questions at this point or go through it again if you're confused as to where things are at or what you're trying to see.
Thank you for the walkthrough.
Yeah.
Glad to do so.
And so if there's a metric that we would like to see on here that's not here, we could.
I'm your guy.
Okay, awesome.
All right. Well, terrific.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have a number of continued Levy Fresh Air forums coming up, and so be sure to check not only the website, but our social media pages, September 28th, the 5th, the 14th of October, the 15th of October. Well, the 14th of October is our next regular trustee meeting. And then we've got a workshop at the end of October as well. So a lot's coming up over the next month. And so opportunities to ask questions and to get the information that everyone needs. We are going to move now into executive session. And so we're going to move into executive session per Idaho Code 74-206 1J to consider labor contract matters authorized under Section 74-206 1A and B under Idaho Code. Is there a motion to move into executive session?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Roll call.
Yes.
And
Trustee Anderson?
Yes.
Thank you.
thank you. We'll go ahead and take a 5-minute recess while we close the doors then and clear the room and